I never imagined that the warm Christmas dinner we'd planned would turn into the night I realized my sister didn't just betray me, she invaded my life. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. It was a chilly December evening, and my parents' house smelled of pine and cinnamon. The lights twinkled, and holiday music played softly in the background. I, Claire, had spent weeks preparing for this dinner. I had worked hard all year, managing my small apartment, paying bills on time, and building a life I could be proud of. I was proud of my independence, and I liked it that way. Then there was Lena, my younger sister. She had always been the charming one, the one who could talk her way into anything. But there was something different tonight. She kept glancing around the room as if claiming it as her own. I noticed the little comments she made about my apartment, my furniture, and even my new holiday decorations. At first, I laughed it off, thinking she was joking. The dinner started warmly. My parents were excited, friends and family were around, and the table was filled with delicious food. But there was tension I couldn't ignore. Lena's smile felt forced, and her words had an edge I hadn't heard before. I had no idea that tonight would mark the beginning of a series of betrayals that would shake my life. That night, I realized that being family didn't always mean trust. Sometimes, it meant standing up for yourself before someone else takes over your life. We were halfway through dessert when Lena cleared her throat and dropped the bomb. "Actually, I'm thinking of moving in with you for a while," she said casually, smiling like it was the most normal thing in the world. The words hit me like a punch. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth, unable to believe she could just announce something so huge without asking. My parents' faces didn't change much. In fact, they seemed pleased, even encouraging. "That sounds like a great idea, Lena," my mom said warmly. "You can stay as long as you need." My father nodded, smiling in agreement. I felt my stomach twist. No one even paused to see how I felt. I tried to speak, to explain that my apartment was small, that I had plans, that this was sudden. But every word I opened my mouth to say seemed to disappear under their smiles and Lena's excited chatter about rearranging things and making space. It wasn't just a suggestion, it was a takeover. I looked at Lena, and she seemed completely unaware of the chaos she'd caused. Her tone was cheerful, as if she were sharing good news instead of stepping into my home and my life without permission. The audacity of it left me numb. The warmth of the dinner disappeared. I tried to mask my anger with polite nods, but inside, my heart sank. My parents were blind to how unfair this was, and Lena was already imagining herself living there, laughing at my stunned silence. I realized in that moment that nothing would feel the same again. That night, betrayal wasn't just a word, it was living right across from me at the dinner table. The day after Christmas, I tried to talk to Lena privately, hoping to set some limits before things got worse. I gently explained that I needed my own space, that routines and privacy were important to me. I thought she would understand, at least a little. Instead, she laughed, leaning back on my couch like she owned it already. "Claire, you're way too uptight," she said, smirking. "You worry too much about rules and plans. Relax a little. Sharing is fun." Her words stung more than I expected. It wasn't just the disrespect, it was the way she made my independence seem like a flaw. I tried to reason with her, pointing out small things, like keeping her belongings contained, respecting quiet hours, or helping with bills. But Lena waved me off, dismissing everything I said as unnecessary fuss. Her confidence was exhausting, and her sense of entitlement seemed endless. What made it worse was how my parents reacted. Whenever I brought up concerns, they shrugged or smiled awkwardly, quietly encouraging her instead of listening to me. Even little comments from them, like "she's your sister, just let her be," made me feel smaller. I could feel a wall rising between me and them, a wall I hadn't expected to encounter in my own family. Every day, the apartment felt less like mine. Small frustrations added up. She left dishes in the sink, borrowed things without asking, and constantly criticized my choices. My attempts to keep peace only made her bolder. By the end of the week, I felt isolated in the place I had worked so hard to build. It wasn't just about space or furniture, it was about respect. And slowly, I realized that if I didn't find a way to stand my ground, Lena would take everything from me without a second thought. One evening, I came home from work early, hoping to catch a quiet moment for myself. As I stepped inside, I froze. Boxes that hadn't been there before were stacked in my living room. Clothes, shoes, even some of my books had been moved or mixed with items that clearly belonged to Lena. My heart sank. It was one thing to announce she was staying, but it was another to treat my home as if it were hers already. I felt a rush of anger, quickly followed by disbelief. She hadn't even asked or told me. Every corner I looked at reminded me that my sanctuary was disappearing, bit by bit. Then came the calls from my parents. They seemed sympathetic toward Lena, repeating what she had told them. "She's just overwhelmed right now. She really needs us," my mom said softly. Lena had painted herself as the innocent one, as if I were the one being unreasonable. I felt trapped between my own home and the family who should have understood me. Every explanation I tried to give fell flat. My words seemed to vanish, while Lena's excuses and excuses of dependency carried weight. She smiled so convincingly in her messages to them, making me feel like the problem in my own life. I started noticing small things that confirmed my suspicion. Packages addressed to her were appearing on my porch, and she had changed some of my furniture around, claiming she thought it would look better. Each act chipped away at my sense of control. By the end of the night, I realized this wasn't temporary. Lena wasn't just living with me, she was slowly taking over. And the worst part? Everyone else seemed to believe her. I felt cornered, unsure how to reclaim what was rightfully mine. By the next morning, I could barely think straight. Anger and hurt twisted inside me, making every small noise in my apartment feel like an intrusion. I loved Lena, I always had, but what she was doing made me question everything. How could someone you cared about act with such disregard? The guilt of feeling angry at my own sister gnawed at me, but the sense of disrespect burned hotter. I needed someone to understand, so I called my best friend, Maya. Her voice was calm, a steady presence I could lean on. As I explained what had happened, I could feel the tension in my chest slowly loosen. I told her how Lena had started taking over my home, how my parents seemed blind to it, and how helpless I felt when my own words fell on deaf ears. Maya listened, her silence letting me spill out all the disbelief and frustration I had been holding in. "I can't believe she thinks she can do this," I said, my voice shaking. "It's like she planned it all, like she enjoys seeing me struggle." I admitted the guilt too, feeling torn between loyalty and self-preservation. She reminded me that wanting to protect yourself didn't make me a bad sister. That reassurance hit me hard. I had been blaming myself for feeling hurt, when really, Lena's actions were crossing every line. Hearing someone else say it made the betrayal feel real, but also gave me a spark of clarity. I could no longer ignore what was happening. Loving Lena didn't mean letting her take control of my life. Somewhere in the mix of frustration and sadness, I felt the first stirrings of determination. I would find a way to take back my home, and my peace of mind. It didn't take long for Lena to push past all limits. One morning, I came home to find my living room completely rearranged. My favorite chair was in the corner, the rug flipped the wrong way, and even small decorations were moved. It felt like a stranger had been inside, not my sister. That same week, I discovered my car had been used without asking. Gas was low, and there were crumbs and items left inside that weren't mine. I was furious, but confronting her only made her smile, as if she had done nothing wrong. She even joked about borrowing it to run errands, brushing off my protests like they didn't matter. Then came the friends. I walked into the apartment one evening to find 3 of her acquaintances lounging in my kitchen, laughing loudly, drinking from my cups, and eating my food. Lena introduced them to me casually, as if inviting strangers into someone else's house was perfectly normal. My heart pounded. It hit me hard, this wasn't a temporary stay. She wasn't here for help, or to catch a break. She was slowly taking over, making herself at home while I became a visitor in my own space. Every corner of the apartment felt less mine, every possession less secure. By the weekend, I was tense all the time, walking on eggshells, constantly checking on my things. My patience was gone, replaced by a simmering frustration I could barely contain. Lena's audacity had reached a point where ignoring it wasn't an option anymore. I realized the situation had to change before it got completely out of hand. This wasn't just about furniture or cars, it was about respect, boundaries, and taking back control of my life before it disappeared entirely. By the following week, I realized waiting and hoping things would improve was useless. Lena had made it clear she had no intention of respecting my space or my life. That's when I decided I couldn't stay passive any longer. I started quietly keeping track of everything. Every time she moved something without permission, used my things, or twisted words with my parents, I noted it down. I even began recording our conversations on my phone, not to embarrass her yet, but to have proof if I needed it. Each time she lied or tried to make me look unreasonable, I captured it carefully. It felt strange at first, treating my own home like a place to gather evidence, but I needed clarity. I needed a way to show everyone, including Lena, that her actions were not harmless or innocent. It wasn't about revenge yet, it was about protecting myself and reclaiming respect. I also started keeping receipts, photos, and messages that showed her influence on my life. Small details mattered. Every borrowed item, every change she made, and every manipulation became part of a record I could use to finally stand my ground. Emotionally, I felt a mix of determination and relief. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of control returning. Instead of letting anger dominate, I was turning it into something purposeful. I didn't just want to survive Lena's takeover, I wanted her to face the truth about how far she had overstepped. This quiet, careful preparation became my armor. Each day I added to it, knowing that someday, I would confront her with everything she had done. And when that moment came, I wanted justice, not chaos, not yelling, but undeniable proof that my boundaries and my life deserved respect. One evening, I decided I couldn't stay silent any longer. I sat down with my parents, hoping to explain how difficult it had become living with Lena. I chose my words carefully, keeping my tone calm, showing respect while stating my boundaries. I thought they would understand how serious the situation was. But their reaction stunned me. My mom waved her hand, saying I was overthinking things. "You're being too sensitive, Claire," she said lightly. My dad added, "Lena's just trying to fit in. You could be a little more flexible." Their smiles made it clear they weren't taking me seriously. I felt a sharp pang in my chest. It wasn't just Lena anymore, it was the people I trusted most, the ones who were supposed to support me. Their dismissal made the apartment feel even smaller, the invasion of my space heavier. For the first time, I realized that I couldn't rely on anyone to defend me. As I listened, a wave of frustration mixed with resolve washed over me. Being polite hadn't worked. Appealing to fairness hadn't worked. My parents' refusal to acknowledge the problem only strengthened my determination. In that moment, I knew I had to take matters into my own hands. If no one else would stand up for me, I would. I had to protect what was mine and reclaim control over my home and life. The betrayal cut deep, but it also lit a fire inside me. I wasn't just fighting Lena's intrusion anymore, I was proving to myself that I could face this challenge, handle it wisely, and ensure my life wasn't dictated by someone else's selfishness. Soon, Lena's boldness went beyond space, she started taking advantage of my finances. I noticed bills being higher than usual, and small purchases I hadn't authorized appeared on my statements. At first, I hoped it was a mistake, but patterns quickly became obvious. She was deliberately using my money, pretending it was normal, as if I wouldn't notice. It wasn't just about money, it was the way she did it. She would casually mention things she needed or hint that I should cover expenses, smiling as if I was being unreasonable for hesitating. Each comment made me uneasy, each act chipped away at my patience. I began paying closer attention to her behavior. I noticed how she timed things, she'd ask for help right before I had plans, rearranging schedules to inconvenience me. She would choose moments when I was tired or distracted, knowing I'd be more likely to comply. It was calculated, subtle, and infuriating. Her arrogance was like a game to her, seeing how far she could push without consequences. Every borrowed item, every small lie, every uncomfortable situation was a test. And I realized she wasn't careless, she was intentional. She wanted to see how much she could get away with before I reacted. Despite the frustration, I reminded myself not to act impulsively. Anger alone wouldn't solve anything. I watched, documented, and prepared, recognizing that this behavior was another piece of evidence I could use. Lena was testing boundaries and trying to assert control, but I was learning to stay 2 steps ahead. By the end of the week, I was more aware than ever. Her arrogance didn't scare me, it only strengthened my resolve. I knew that if I waited patiently and collected proof, I could confront her in a way that couldn't be ignored. I decided it was time to act quietly, without causing a scene. I started finding clever ways to turn Lena's tricks against her. When she tried to charge things on my account, I redirected payments so they went elsewhere, making it clear that her freedom to misuse my resources was limited. I also set small traps to reveal her dishonesty to my parents. Simple things, like leaving certain receipts visible or arranging situations where her excuses wouldn't make sense, allowed them to see inconsistencies without me having to raise my voice. Each little revelation chipped away at the image she had built of herself as helpless or innocent. At the same time, I began reclaiming parts of my life quietly. I established boundaries she couldn't ignore, like locking certain areas or taking back control of schedules she had been manipulating. It wasn't about confrontation, it was about making her feel the consequences of overstepping without direct conflict. Watching her stumble over her own lies was strangely satisfying. She would try to explain situations to my parents, only to have the evidence quietly reveal the truth. I could see confusion and frustration flicker across her face, a sharp contrast to the smug confidence she had carried before. Every day, I felt more in control. The apartment started feeling like my own space again, and the tension I had been carrying began to ease. Lena's overconfidence had become her weakness, and I was patient enough to use it to my advantage. By the time I finished setting up my plan, I realized that subtle strategy could be far more powerful than confrontation. It wasn't about revenge for the sake of anger, it was about reclaiming respect and authority in my own life, piece by piece, without giving her a single chance to argue. The next family gathering was tense before it even began. I had prepared carefully, bringing everything I had collected over the past weeks, receipts, messages, records of her manipulations, and proof of her unauthorized spending. I knew this was my moment to finally set things right. As everyone sat around the table, Lena started her usual cheerful chatter, acting as if nothing had happened. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my calm. "I think it's time we clear the air," I said, my voice steady. The room went quiet, and all eyes turned to me. One by one, I presented the evidence. I showed how she had used my finances without permission, altered schedules, and misled our parents about events. I pointed out the patterns of her lies and manipulations, the ways she had made me feel trapped in my own home. At first, Lena tried to laugh it off, claiming misunderstandings and mistakes. But as I laid out every detail, her confident smile faltered. My parents' expressions changed from confusion to shock, then to disbelief. They started asking questions, and the inconsistencies in her stories became impossible to ignore. I could see panic flicker across her face. She stumbled over words, defensive and unsure, trying to explain actions that were now clearly documented. Her usual arrogance was gone, replaced by embarrassment and humiliation. By the end, the room was silent except for murmurs of realization from my family. Lena's facade had crumbled. For the first time, they saw the truth, not her version, but the reality of what she had done. I felt a surge of relief and validation. After weeks of being dismissed and undermined, the truth was finally clear, and I had taken control of my life back. After the confrontation, Lena had no choice. The evidence was undeniable, and my parents could no longer defend her actions. Within a few days, she packed her things and left, her confidence completely gone. The apartment felt different immediately, a sense of calm returning to the space that had been overtaken for weeks. I moved slowly through the rooms, putting my belongings back in their proper places and reclaiming the little corners that had been altered. Every adjustment, every restored item felt like regaining a part of myself that had been lost. The freedom to live on my own terms came rushing back, and with it, a wave of relief I hadn't realized I needed so badly. My family's attitude shifted too. My parents began treating me differently, listening when I spoke and respecting the boundaries I had set. Their support felt genuine this time, and I noticed admiration in their eyes for the way I had handled the situation. They seemed proud, not just that Lena had moved out, but that I had stood my ground calmly, smartly, and without giving in to anger. Even Lena's departure, though painful in memory, brought a sense of closure. I didn't feel victorious in a cruel way, I felt strong, capable, and respected. The betrayal had tested me, but it had also shown me how much I could endure and how firmly I could protect my life. By the end of the week, the apartment was fully mine again. The tension and stress that had weighed heavily for weeks had lifted. I finally felt at peace. This wasn't just about space, it was about respect, control, and proving to myself that no one could manipulate or diminish me when I refused to let them. Sitting in my apartment after everything had settled, I finally allowed myself to think about what had happened. The weeks of tension, fear, and frustration had taken a toll, but they had also taught me something invaluable. I realized that betrayal can come from those closest to you, even from someone you love deeply. Looking back, I could see how much I had grown. I had faced challenges I never expected, kept my composure under pressure, and found ways to protect myself without losing my sense of fairness. It wasn't easy, but I discovered that strength often comes from situations that feel impossible at first. I also understood the importance of standing up for yourself. Loving someone doesn't mean allowing them to disrespect you or take advantage of your kindness. Even when the people you trust fail to recognize the truth, you have to trust yourself and take action to safeguard your life and boundaries. The experience left me stronger, more confident, and aware of my own resilience. I had learned that patience, careful planning, and clarity of purpose could turn difficult situations around. I didn't just reclaim my home, I reclaimed my peace of mind, my confidence, and my sense of self. As I looked around my apartment, I felt a quiet sense of triumph. I had turned betrayal into growth, chaos into calm, and manipulation into an opportunity to prove my own strength. While the pain of betrayal lingered, it was overshadowed by the knowledge that I could face challenges, set limits, and emerge stronger than before. In the end, I learned that empowerment isn't about defeating others, it's about honoring yourself, your boundaries, and the life you deserve. And that lesson will stay with me forever. Do you think I did the right thing standing up to my sister, or should I have let it go? I'm curious about your thoughts, share in the comments. Subscribe and hit the bell for more stories like mine.